So a couple of days ago, she called herself a fat activist, a fat academic, and that's what she called herself, Kat Pausay. She died in her sleep, and she was quite overweight, which was her whole PhD in academia, etc. And she was a bloody delight. She came to see my show in Palmerston North. She was just a sweetheart, so lovely and funny. And oh my God, the trolls that came out on Twitter to rejoice at her death were just abhorrent. Like I'm generally, I like to think I'm not often that shocked, but I was shocked. It's like this woman has died and these fuckers are going, oh, look at this fat lady. I want, and much more horrible things. But then a whole lot of other women were yelling at, because it was all men. And all these other women were just telling all of these men to fuck off. And then they got Twitter bans for using the word fuck too much. So, you know what I mean? Like, but I can see with things like that, and they were not policed in any way, and they were vile, and they were piling on a dead woman. So sometimes I think Twitter doesn't need to have any more freedom of speech.
Yeah, the policing and principles don't seem to even really work. They're so inconsistent if you look at the guidelines for YouTube. So I don't know what Elon Musk's genius idea would be to bring in guidelines that would somehow promote freedom of speech. I'm sure there would still have to be some sort of restriction. In fact, I'd be terrified if Twitter was owned by Elon Musk.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I got banned from Facebook because I said chink in the armor. And somebody asked me if I was marrying Jacinda, and I said, if I told you, I'd have to kill you, and then got banned for that as well. Yeah. So they're lacking nuance. They're lacking idioms, for fuck's sake. Put some idioms in your algorithms, Facebook. Yeah.
Is there any conversation, and I'm allowed to talk about this because I'm fat, is there any conversation here about that you're allowed to have, this is a genuine question, about how her obesity added to her death? Is that a conversation that's allowed to be had in this current climate we live in?
It's a difficult one, but it's certainly not to be had on the day that she dies. Do you know what I mean?
And the punching up, punching down thing as well, yeah? Like speaking literally from experience, 12 kgs heavier than I was a month ago, and having, and wanting to see grandkids and that kind of stuff. I think I can speak to the ideas around fat people dying young and the pressure that it puts on people's bodies and that kind of stuff as well. I would never abuse. In fact, it's nothing but tragic and sad. It's even like those anti-vaxxers who are dying of COVID. It's tragic and sad, although they've made decisions to bring that on themselves. It's like any person having a shortened life for any situation around their own body that potentially could be changed. I'm not saying everyone who's fat can just lose weight. And look, I'm closer to 50 than 40. I'm the person to talk to about how that's not always achievable. But if someone, I don't know, I was scrolling through this trying to find out how old she was. Do you know how old she was?
I think she's 42.
You'll see, that's far too young.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is, some gross little fucker on Twitter saying some really vile things about her is not, that. That's not that.
I agree with you. I agree with you. So at what point can we then go, a 42-year-old should not be dying in their sleep? And if morbid obesity plays a part, when do we have that conversation?
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is like I just feel like Twitter is such a toxic place. It's not the place for it.
So where is and when is, in theory?
With your doctor and in medical journals and publishing of health news and things like that.
Yeah, but in saying that, for stuff we want to look, I'm not disagreeing with you, Penny. This is a genuine conversation. I struggle with that answer, because if we want to put out stuff that we want to support, be it about our own social issues or whatever, Twitter is a perfectly valid place to put it and have that conversation. But because this feels like it's maybe more sensitive and delicate, it's not the place to have it. I don't know if I buy that.
Well, I just don't think the day that she died is the place.
Well, that's fine. I'm with you. That's why I said when and where.
And you don't necessarily even have to, I don't know, just when she was quite beloved, she had a big fan base and people were mourning, and then all these fuckers piled in. It's just like,
I'm with you. I'm with you. No, look, you got no argument out of me about time and place for that.
And the segue to, see, I'm not a Foo Fighters fan. I cannot name you one of their songs, but, this is a tragic case of somebody who is fallen for his own health foibles. His heart was twice its normal size. He had 10 different toxic items in his blood, including heroin and marijuana, etc., etc. So would you be happy with people, on Twitter on that day talking about how he's brought it on himself?
I'm sure there was plenty of them. I do also want to say that I think those haven't all been released yet. There's a little bit of allegedly in there. We haven't had the full toxicology and that kind of stuff at the moment. There's a little bit of controversy in there, but I think it's pretty safe to assume that someone who's OD'd before, if you watch their documentary, people out there back and forth, fantastic documentary. Everyone should watch it, even if you're not a fan, Penny, because it shows the creative process of Dave Grohl getting over Nirvana, starting a new band and moving forward. So even though it's a Foo Fighters documentary, it really is more about the creative process than about them and their music. And they talk about him ODing in that, and I think it was in Rome at one stage. So that's obviously it's a pretty fair guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And they said his heart was twice its normal size, etc. And I hasten to add that I'm not obviously, happy about this in any way. And I just feel so sorry for Dave Grohl. Also, his wife and 3 children. But Dave Grohl, good Lord, this man's been through so much. Yeah. And just everybody there. And it is so tragic. I like the East Pointers. They were a band that somebody, what was his name? Cody Chason. He just died. But then they thought that maybe he'd committed suicide, but then it came out that he had a heart attack. So yeah.
Dave Grohl wrote in his book about Taylor Hawkins that basically as soon as he met him backstage, he fell in love with him.
Oh.
So they were like, best of mates. I'm not sure of the relationship between Dave Grohl and I think you had it when a name jumps out of your head. The lead singer of Nirvana,
Kurt Cobain.
I don't know how close they were, but the way he talks about Taylor Hawkins here is like my best friend forevermore. And I actually don't know how it's a silly thing to say because I don't have that sort of vibe of musician performer in me necessarily, but I don't know how I almost don't know how you'd continue. This is the last time they played together, and this is Dave talking about Taylor Hawkins on stage.
Hold on. There's one more person you can't forget. Ladies and gentlemen. Taylor Hawkins plays the drums in the Foo Fighters all the time. Taylor, do you love it?
Fucking love playing big fucking huge stadiums in Buenos Aires.
It's pretty fun.
So we can leave that down. I know it sounds silly just being a fan of a band, but and you're right, Penny, the wife and kids are the most important, but I'm just heartbroken for the whole thing. It's like my kids know Foo Fighters because I play them probably once a week. I go through the 10 greatest songs and jump around the house and that kind of stuff. And there's been some moments where some people have died, and he's one of them. And it's just like,
don't apologize for it, man. Like, we love these people. These people are in our lives. I was really sad when Betty White died. I was sad when George Michael died. I was so sad when I loved George Michael, which was a futile exercise. But in 1987, I was completely in love. And when I read that on my phone, I clutched my husband's chest and just went, this is it's a loss. It's a loss because you appreciate their talent, which was obviously immense, obviously not for me, but for you. So just no need to apologize.
And he's 50, or he was 50. It's like
bullshit.
And I think it is a really good time. I mean, what was I watching? I follow, I don't know if you know him, but Bert Kreischer, the comedian. I mean, being in the comedian world, you may or may not know him. And I was watching him. He's doing like a tour at the moment, and I was watching him. They've got some video from his tour with them all in the bus, and I just saw him and 3 of his, colleagues who they were touring with, is just drinking and partying and going from town to town in the big bus. And I go, you can just see how that lifestyle just completely screams another night on the bus, another night or for these guys, another night on our jet or whatever. Bit bored, let's stick something up our nose, or let's make this show. And we all know stories about bands who get a bit bored from playing the same 15, 20 songs over again. So the next night they go on with a glass of vodka, and 2 nights later it's a bottle of vodka, and 3 nights later they've already had a bottle of vodka and they take a bottle with them on stage because they're trying to, what we look and see as absolute the dream lifestyle and that kind of stuff. They get bored. And I actually, Penny, is one of the things I loved about theatre sports is it was different every night. I couldn't do, well, I don't have the skill to do, but I couldn't do what you do with a scripted piece, even if it was mine. The things, I found any run I ever did in theatre of a scripted piece, I'd be like finding ways to make it more interesting for me on day 13.
And that's what
theatre sports is different every night. And so I can imagine these bands, I mean, these guys have been together since the late 90s, will be playing some of the same songs on stage that night that they would have probably the day they got together.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah. I mean, like, I always try to have different moments in my shows with audience participation and stuff like that. But like, there's a song that I do in Olive Copperbottom that is a Chopin number that I've added words to about going north and going south. And I love doing that. I love doing it. I love the feeling of singing these really big notes and stuff. And I'm sure that they have similar moments in each song, or a particular song that they love, that they look forward to doing, etc. So I'm sure they had moments like that too. And if not, they need to get out.
So yeah, look, I mean, there's an interesting connection you make between the fat activist and there won't be any hate towards Taylor Hawkins, who's probably killed himself with drugs, leaving his family behind today. Yep. And obviously there is vitriol towards the fat activist, but on both of those things, I still come back to that idea as when is the time to talk about it. And because I agree with you about trolls jumping online the day someone dies. I agree with you, but all too often we're told in society, this is not the time to talk about it. And then we never talk about it. I mean, the classic example is the NRA, when a shooting happens in America and they go, well, we're not talking about it today. And then of course, 6 months later, it's in the distant memory, and we never talk about it. So, you know, I'll keep talking about it because I've lost 12 kilos in a month, and I'll keep telling people about that as well.
So you've lost 12 kilos in a month?
Yeah.
Well done, dude. I thought you said you put it on. No, that's much better. Well done.
Yeah. No, 12 kilos down in a month, and I'll keep doing that. And for me, it's probably middle of next year before I'm finished doing it. But so that's why I think I can speak to it.
That's so much. What did you?
I might be more like 6 weeks, 6 or 7 weeks, not a month.
Phenomenal amounts of weight to, because it is hard. Like, I've been on Jenny Craig numerous times. I'm actually on epilepsy medication that made me hungry for a long time, and I didn't put 2 and 2 together. So that's why I was hungry. So I know what it is to try and lose weight when you can't, and it's really hard. And a lot of really skinny people just have no concept of how hard it can be. So well done to you.
People also don't understand, and I'm not saying I can speak to poor old Taylor, but people also don't understand that if you are significantly, massively overweight, you probably have a food addiction. And the most difficult thing about a food addiction is that if you're addicted to heroin or alcohol or marijuana or porn or whatever else, you actually can cut that out of your life and you don't need it to survive. The most difficult thing about a food addiction is you need to keep consuming the thing you're addicted to or you will die. Yeah. There's not really any other addiction in the world where if you give up the thing you're addicted to, you will then literally die. Yeah. Food addiction is one of those things. And I've done this my whole life, and I've been yo-yo dieting, and I've lost weight and I've gained weight and I've lost weight and I've gained weight. So I haven't really talked about it. This is the first time I've talked about it, Penny, to be honest with you. And it's not something I'm going to shout from the rooftops, because there's a part of me that's gone, I've done this 20 times in my life and I've failed every time, because if I hadn't failed every time, I'd be at a healthy and correct weight, which I'm not. So that means I failed every time. And so I haven't really blogged about it or publicized about it or whatever until now. But I guess in looking at what we're talking about today, I think I've got something to add to this conversation. We get back to who gets to talk about it. We come right back to the conversation, full circle.
Can I just say that alcoholics, if they do stop drinking, that they should be really careful, because they can die if they stop drinking.
But what I'm saying is, alcohol doesn't need to be a part of their life forevermore. I get it that if you come off it straight away, it can be harmful, but it's not something that in 20 years' time they need.
It's not sustenance, right? Yeah, you don't need. It's not like water or air.
Yeah. You just have to. That's the thing. You go on diets, but that's not what you need to be on a diet forever. A specific way of eating forever. So that's the change.